Hey there, listeners. Hola, amigos. Before we dive into today's episode, we have a very small favor to ask. If you enjoy our podcast and want to help us to keep bringing you great content, the best way to support us is by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. It only takes a minute, but it makes a huge difference because your ratings and reviews help more listeners to discover our show. And it keeps us motivated to continue doing what we love and bringing you more content for free. Plus, we love hearing your feedback. So if you have a moment, head over to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, and leave a very quick review. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to the Costa Property Podcast, the podcast that turns your dreams of owning a piece of paradise on the Costa del Sol into reality. I'm Warner Laurie, and I'm joined by my co-host and wives, Sandra Laurie.
Join us as we embark on navigating the ins and outs of real estate and relocation to this beautiful region.
We're not just about market trends, we're about sharing real-life experiences, because we know the struggle firsthand, and I've helped many people navigate this challenge also.
If you're dreaming of your perfect Costa del Sol home and want to get real, no-frills, expert advice, then you're absolutely in the right place. Join us each week as we share honest insights and information that will guide your journey. Are tourists no longer welcome in Spain? What do buyers and relocators really need to know when it comes to the media coverage about anti-tourism sentiment? So you've probably seen the headlines, Spain is full, tourists go home, and protests hitting the streets in places like Barcelona and the Canary Islands. And it's enough really to make anybody thinking about relocating or even buying a second home feel a bit uneasy. And I totally get that. But how true is this for places like the Costa del Sol? Are expats and visitors really no longer welcome? Today I'm sitting down with Warner here in our Benalmádena office to talk about what we really are seeing on the ground. We'll dive into the headlines, take a closer look at the housing conversation and what this all means for you if you're planning to move to Spain. Thanks for joining me this morning.
No problem. How are you today, Sandra?
Good. I wanted to take some time with you this morning, Warner, to talk about the headlines that the media is painting, this picture that Spain is pushing back against tourism and foreign buyers, and that tourism is no longer welcome in Spain. I would like for us really to explore what we're seeing on the ground, because the mistake I see here is that we're talking about two different things. We're talking about anti-tourism and we're talking about the housing crisis. They're two totally separate topics. And from a media reporting perspective, there's a lot of scaremongering going on. And what the press has done, from what I can see, is they've taken two very separate and nuanced topics and they've literally went, boom, and merged them into one, which is creating a lot of confusion for tourists who are intending to travel to Spain, but also a little bit of stress and worry for buyers who are intending on maybe relocating to the Costa del Sol or purchasing their second home, a holiday home on the Costa del Sol. Let's talk through, Warner. What's your take on this and what are you seeing on the ground?
Everybody's seen the headlines, the media, they're really on the forefront when all these tourists go home and we don't want tourism and everything else. And I kind of get it to a point. Like cities like Barcelona, they have an extreme amount of tourism. So we have investors capitalising on that accommodation and buying it up so that they can rent them out as Airbnb. But Barcelona also has a massive population that work in the city. So these people that work in the city can't get accommodation in the city, so they have to go to the suburbs. So I totally get it if you're working in the city centre and you have to travel in an hour. And then all the tourism, you see all the tourists coming and taking the accommodation. I totally get where they're coming from. In places like Palma, they're doing the same thing. Palma's an island. It's easy for the government to blame mass tourism on it, but actually it's basically all about planning. They never planned properly with this, and a lot of investors jumped on and bought the apartments, and the government were thinking, okay, this is great because we can get another income out of the tourist licenses, but forgot about their own people and their economy and working with that economy. So I totally get it. And even if you could afford an apartment in the city centre in Barcelona, the prices are so overinflated because people are buying them up for investment.
Yeah, I think it is a very fair concern, and it's definitely a very emotional one. And I can understand it, especially in big cities that you're talking about, like Barcelona, for example, where rents have absolutely skyrocketed, which is, again, down to shortage of property and tourism. I guess it's combined, but the truth is actually a bit more nuanced than that. And I think that's important to explore. Most expats relocating to places like Benalmádena, for example, because I think it's very different. Benalmádena, Barcelona, Costa del Sol, to these key cities is very different. Expats relocating to places like Benalmádena or buying second homes, they're not always competing for the same housing stock as local residents, right? If you're taking a holiday or, your intention is to buy your holiday home, potentially what's on your priority list or on your wish list is going to be very different to somebody living locally. You're likely going to want front line, second line beach, all of the amenities that come with a holiday home. If you live here and you're a local, that maybe is not necessarily what's actually going to interest you. Often just assuming that's the challenge and that people are bidding for the same property, that's actually not the case. It's a deeper issue. It's, as you mentioned, Warner, a lack of affordable housing due to, I would say, limited urban planning, the short-term rental saturation, years of underinvestment in public housing, let's not go there. And also, there has been a massive fear for people as well that when they have bought an investment property and rented it out, there's been a fear to long-term rent because there hasn't been proper landlord protection against people who didn't pay rents, or also squatters if people were actually squatting illegal in your property. Property owners that had a second home for investment, they were really afraid to go the long-term rental route because if their tenants stopped paying rent, they weren't getting proper protection in terms of policies or proper support from the authorities. So they just went, okay, we'll go the easy route. We'll go short-term rental. We'll rent out holiday rentals and for short term because that removed that risk. But then what did that do? That meant that when it came to rental accommodation in the local market for locals on a long-term basis, it just wasn't available. And you really had this bidding war for rentals, which has actually exacerbated the situation as well. But I think let's talk more around what we see on the Costa del Sol, because as I mentioned, what we're seeing on the Costa del Sol, particularly in Benalmádena, is not the same sentiment, is not the same as what is being reported in the media in these key cities. In Benalmádena, from my point of view, Warner, expats, non-locals, it really is the fabric of the town. And Benalmádena is a huge cultural melting pot. You have so many nationalities living together. What would you say to that? What do you think is happening here in Benalmádena?
Yeah, I think the Costa del Sol is different. They've been used to the tourism influx every year. Benalmádena, for example, in the summer months, it jumps 50% more than the residents are there. They're used to that. That's why the locals have businesses there. You can get all restaurants, the Puerto Marina. They really need the tourism strategy there. I don't think that Benalmádena has always been known as a tourist go-to zone, and probably most of it on the train line from Malaga to Figueroa is tourism. But the Costa del Sol is vast, so people can commute from Mijas to get to Malaga in 30 minutes. I think the problem in the Costa del Sol is what you said. It's really that the government are not doing protection with the landlords, so the landlords have fear of renting the property out long term in case the tenant doesn't pay.
Okay, but let's take a step back on that. Okay, so let's talk about specifically what's happening here on the ground in Benalmádena. So Benalmádena, first of all, we always talk about the three different areas of Benalmádena. You have the Benalmádena Costa area, it's definitely geared towards the tourism market, and local business in the Benalmádena Costa area, they make their living from the tourism market and from people that have made an intention to acquire a holiday home or a second holiday residence on the Costa del Sol, okay? And I think that's widely accepted Okay, so shutting down or saying tourists aren't welcome in Benalmádena, that's not something that we have seen here at all. Actually, on the contrary, I haven't seen any negative sentiment towards tourism here in Benalmádena or in the other areas of the Costa del Sol that we visit regularly. There is a widely accepted fact that tourism along the Costa del Sol and in Benalmádena is the bread and butter of the town and of the community. There is local businesses here that rely on tourism and the second home owner who visits for part of their year to support their income, to make a living. So that I find it really stressful, actually, and upsetting when I see these exaggerated headlines on the media talking about tourists are not welcome, tourists go home, because that's just not what we're seeing here, Warner, is it?
The Costa del Sol was, for as long as I can remember, is always open, with open arms, because tourism is the blood of the economy, to be honest with you. And I've not seen any sentiment of over-tourism here. When I see the press in Barcelona and everything else, I get it, but for me, Costa del Sol is business as usual.
Yeah, I would agree on that. We weren't born in Benalmádena. We're also expats who have chose to relocate here and live our life. But I think there is some etiquette that has to be adhered to. Even for us, when we hit that heavy summer season from June to September, the population of the town is increasing dramatically. You cannot get parking. You cannot get reservations or eat in the places that you usually like to eat in. We avoid the beach completely because it's just packed. So yeah, look, as a local, as people who have grown up in the area, as natives from the town, I can imagine that is stressful for them as much as it's stressful for us. And we love when, the kids go back to school in September and that kind of calmness comes over the town again, and you're just able to enjoy your hometown as a tourist. And that's always nice. And I don't agree when I see people walking into supermarkets with their shirts off or in their bikinis. Would you do that in your hometown? No. So I think you need to be conscious of the fact that you are visiting and on holidays, you are a guest in somebody's hometown. There's certain etiquette that you should abide to. Treat your holiday destination as you would respectfully treat your hometown. And I think as well, you're on holiday, I totally get it, but make a conscious effort to try to support local business, eat in restaurants where locals are eating, visit some of the local sites and hotspots. I think that's important. If we want tourists to have a good reputation, I think it's important to think about some etiquettes and respect the town that you're visiting in the same way that you'd visit your hometown, Warner. I think those kind of things can cause some tensions and stresses in the heat of that high season.
Yeah, totally. It can get, as you said, stressful. Tourism, they're always open. Tourism is the lifeblood of the Costa del Sol, whether it be for buying properties or spending money in local restaurants and bars and just contributing to the economy. It's so important.
So one thing that comes up often is how second home buyers and full-time relocators are perceived differently. What would be your experience and take on this?
It was always a dream for people to have a second home, to get away from their home country, to come to sunnier climates and enjoy themselves. They've always been welcomed with that. And now over the last couple of years, we're actually starting to see families from all over Europe and further afield coming in, benefiting the economy, putting their kids into schools. It's exciting because if tourism does go down in the future, then, we have all the people relocating here to make sure that the economy and the business as usual.
Yeah, I just want to maybe give a different angle on that question. In every wake of life, if you have people that are relocating, second home buyers and full-time relocators, are they perceived differently? I would say overall as a pot of people, no. But in life, like everything, you get good second home buyers and good relocators and maybe bad ones, right? So let's think about full-time relocators for a second. If you're a full-time relocator and you have that intention to relocate to the Costa del Sol and you make an attempt to integrate. So you support local businesses, you integrate your kids into school, you make an effort with the families and friends that your kids are going to integrate and mix with. And you don't just relocate and stick to the Irish bar or the English bar or the Dutch bar or the Scandinavian bar down the road. If you frequent in local places, if you make an attempt to integrate and mix, that's a good relocator. And that's really appreciated by the locals when they see people integrating and mixing and making an effort. And I'd say the same context applies for a second home buyer. If you're coming home for 3 or 4 months of your year to spend time in your holiday home on the Costa del Sol, don't just come over and go to the Irish bar down the road or the English bar down the road or the English cafe for your fry up every morning. Go to local businesses, make an effort to integrate, because at the end of the day, you can get your fry up when you go back home. You've bought your holiday home to live a different life, to experience something differently. Make sure that you're doing that and taking advantage of that. And I think when it comes to people being perceived differently, as in the local or the second home buyer or the full-time relocator, they're perceived differently if they make the attempt to integrate and mix or not. That's my opinion. What would you say to that?
Yeah, totally. When we came to the Costa del Sol in 2016 back from Ireland, we basically rented in a Spanish area, made sure that we ate in Spanish restaurants, got teachers to teach us Spanish, put our kids into Spanish school. That is the groundwork for making a success and living in the Costa del Sol, because you have to engrave yourself in the culture, and it makes you feel like part of the being a resident, and it gives you, amazing schools, football academies, golf academies. So everything that families need is here in the Costa del Sol, but you have to feel comfortable and you have to feel part of that.
Yeah, and it's fair to say within those schools, clubs, hobbies, extracurricular activities, our kids mix with a wide and vast range of nationalities. So it is a multicultural society over here. It's not actually about where you're from. It's really about how you're showing up once you get here. And honestly, most people coming to settle, they bring energy, they bring investment and life to the area, and that is appreciated. But it's very much down to how you show up, going all in and making the best of that experience and establishing that foundation of your new life.
Yeah, absolutely. When we came in 2016, we've never looked back. And a lot of families are recognising that now. They don't want the rat race. They want a better life for their family, enjoy their time with their kids. And also the security. The Costa del Sol is very safe compared to other destinations around Europe. And then the outdoor lifestyle that it brings. You've not got the kids sitting in playing computer games. They're outside playing football or playing golf or socialising. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. So here's, I guess, the big question now. Should people still consider buying a home here, whether they're looking to relocate or invest in a holiday property, if they've been reading these anti-tourism sentiments, which, by the way, seem to have just exaggerated and blown up overnight. Every time I open a social media page or go onto a search engine, all I'm seeing is Spain doesn't want tourists. Tourists go home. It's very prevalent at the moment. And I guess this is the time of year when people are considering and preparing for their holidays. I understand why it's there, but it's scaremongering. So, that big question, Warner, should people still consider to buy a home or a holiday home here?
It seems as if the media around the world have a problem with Spain, but if you look at the GDP in Spain, it's one of the best in Europe. There's a reason for that, because people are coming in investing their money into Spain, into tourism. People are jealous of that, because Spain, when the credit crunch hit, Spain was in a really bad place. From then to now, Spain is in an amazing place. And in Malaga, they've got the technological hub where they've got all the big companies. It's all bringing business and investment to the Costa del Sol, and long may it continue.
Yeah, Warner, I think that's a fair point. It's almost, are they jealous? Is there a sabotage happening here with a view of deterring people away from Spain because people are maybe this is naive. They're jealous of Spain's economy at the moment, which is absolutely going in the right trajectory. But aside from that, Spain is a safe country. It's a country that is maintaining its culture and traditions in a world where that's very rare. And I can see the appeal. I can understand the allure, because if I was on the other side of that fence looking in with a view of trying to establish my life in Spain, I would want to do the same. So again, to answer the big question, if your plan is to purchase a holiday home on the Costa del Sol, if your plan is to still relocate to the Costa del Sol, do not be put off by what you're reading in the press or media. From my perspective, based here on the ground, this is scaremongering, and this is not a correct reflection of the reality that we are seeing living our life here on the Costa del Sol in Benalmádena. I absolutely acknowledge the challenges in the larger cities, but we've discussed some of those nuances earlier, and it's not as simple as putting everything into the same pot to say that Spain is anti-tourism, because the topic is more complicated than that. So look, don't put off your holidays. Don't change your plans. It's still safe for you to visit here. But as I said, if you are visiting, I would always encourage you to be a respectful guest, and go back to some of those topics that I mentioned earlier around treat your holiday home the same way you would treat your home. Don't go into the supermarket in your bikini. Don't walk around the supermarket or the pharmacy with your top off, particularly if you don't look like David Beckham. Ask yourself, would I do this in my hometown? Would I walk around my hometown supermarket in my red bikini? I think you'll find you wouldn't. So we just need to be respectful and mindful that when you're visiting tourism destinations, you're visiting people's homes, okay? So keep that attire to the beach or to the swimming pool, and everybody will get on great. It's important to forget that the Costa del Sol continues to attract families, professionals and retirees, because it is a safe destination for people to relocate to. It's got a great quality of life. It's got the culture, the traditions, it's got the climate, it's got everything. There's absolutely a clear understanding of the demand and the allure. But what I want to say on this, just another point what I want to mention here, is that if the plan is to relocate and you plan on doing it this year and you're looking at the prices because the demand is still high and saying, oh, it might go down, there is no indication that the prices are going to go down or slow down. Stop waiting, get a move on and accelerate your plan, or you're going to be even more disappointed.
Just to add on that, I feel as if years and years ago, the Costa del Sol was known as a good place, a budget place to buy a property. Obviously, through time, what the Costa del Sol offers, and with the prices going on all worldwide, obviously the prices are going to go up. But for what you're getting, for the price that you're paying, it's still fantastic value for money. And this is the reason that the prices will still keep on going up percentage, because, you get close to the beach, you get to, in Benalmádena, the marina, you can walk everywhere. And don't forget, 325 sunshine days a year.
Absolutely. So look, we absolutely acknowledge that tourism has some impact. The demand for Airbnbs, the explosion of that short-term rental market, I guess they call it the Airbnb effect. Landlords pulled properties from short-term rentals and markets to list them as holiday lets. We've seen that. We all acknowledge that because it was more lucrative for them, but it was also because they weren't getting the right support to have long-term tenants in their apartments. That issue is not solely connected to tourists not been welcome in the area. It's important to separate and differentiate between that. The crisis is due to supply and demand, underinvestment in affordable housing. There's lots of more nuances than just a blanket statement saying tourists are not welcome, tourists go home, because that is not the case. If today's episode gave you some perspective and some peace of mind, make sure you hit follow so you don't miss any of our upcoming chats as the market evolves on the Costa del Sol, especially as we hit into that high summer period. And if you're planning your own move and want grounded local insight, just reach out to us. We're always happy to help. You'll find all the links in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Ciao for now. Thank you so much for listening into today's episode on the Costa Property Podcast. Another fantastic episode learning about the highs and lows of relocating to the Costa del Sol from real people who have been through the journey themselves and, of course, our wonderful experts. If you have been enjoying the show so far, remember to hit subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review.
We absolutely love hearing your thoughts. Please send any questions that you would like us to answer on the show to warner@wlcostaproperties.net, or you can pop us a message on our socials, which are in the show notes. Remember, you can also visit the website www.wlcostaproperties.net.
See you on the next episode, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.